Overruled. You may continue.
Your assessment of the tape, you don't see anything indicating that the defendant is uncomfortable in any way, do you?
You mean 7 months later?
No, I mean on May 10th of 2008. So,
seven months after she said she was uncomfortable?
All right, if you want to say 7 months after she was uncomfortable, let's go with 7 months. Yeah, 7 months after she was uncomfortable.
I don't see discomfort in the tape of 510, if that's what you're asking.
And ma'am, just for the purposes of the math here, if that happened in May of 2008, would you agree then that 7 months before that would be November of 2007, correct?
Correct.
And
No, I'm sorry. November.
So
it was November of 2006 when they first had the sexual encounter, so it's quite a bit prior to that.
Part of the reason that I point that out is that it appears that you seem to jump to a conclusion when you're answering these questions, and like in this case, you were mistaken. Wouldn't you agree?
Objection argumentative.
Overruled.
That I gave the wrong date, the 7 months?
You were mistaken, weren't you?
Yes, and I remembered quickly that it was November 6th.
No, you didn't remember quickly. Actually, the prosecutor prompted you, correct?
Objection relevance argumentative.
Overruled.
Isn't that how it worked?
I didn't feel prompted by you, but okay, if you want to prompt
Well,
me,
no.
that's fine.
Didn't the prosecutor indicate to you May 2008, and just for purposes of clarification, he then indicated it was November 2007. Do you remember that exchange?
And
just
then,
now?
yes, and then I said...
Yes or no?
That,
Yes or no?
I said...
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, ma'am, one of the other things about the interview that you had with the defendant is that you had these issues with regard to what she told you, but you also prompted her with leading questions, didn't you?
I don't believe I did.
You suggested some answers, didn't you?
Objection foundation of faith.
Are you talking about...
Objection overruled. You may answer yes or no.
I don't... I mean, I interviewed her over 44 hours, so I'm not sure. I try very hard not to lead people.
Well, do you remember that with regard to her, one of the things involving sex was that you had an issue or a question as to whether or not the defendant or the defendant, yes, isn't it true that you wanted to know from Miss Arias whether or not she used sex to quell his anger? That is your question, right?
Yes.
And those are your words, right?
Yes, but I think she had already mentioned that to me. And I was
Well,
just...
if she had already mentioned it to you, then why did you feel the need to ask her about it?
You know, that was a long time ago.
Well, then maybe we
I
can-
don't know. I really don't know. I can't tell you.
Let's take a look at your notes about what you wanted to ask her.
All right.
Objection judgment confirmation.
Overruled.
Take a look at Exhibit 612. You recognize the writing there?
Sure.
That's your writing, correct?
Yes, it is.
And at the top of the page, it indicates ask Jodi, right?
Yes.
These are the questions that you wanted to ask her, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, there are more than one or two questions there, correct?
Yes. Yes. there
And none of these questions, if you will, have a question mark after them, do they?
No, I guess not.
Well, no, let's just take a look at the first one and read that. And, well, just read the whole document to see there are no question marks there.
No, there aren't any question marks.
But you do say that you want to ask Jodi about this, correct?
Correct.
This is part of your investigation into this case, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that you wanted to ask Jodi was, did you use sex to quell his anger, right?
Yes.
So that was your, if you will, question to the defendant, correct?
It was my question.
Yes. And so you were leading her or suggesting the answer there, weren't you?
I didn't feel that I was.
I know you don't feel that you were, but isn't it true that you're saying, did you use sex to quell his anger, right? You're speaking specifically about anger in that question, right?
It was after.
Objection. Judge Bailey.
You may. You may continue.
Isn't it true that you were suggesting the answer there when you were talking about anger?
I was basing it on information that I had gotten from journals and other information, and I was putting it together, and I was asking the question because it appeared that that was happening.
So
But-
the answer
So
is...
I did ask that question. I did ask
Yes
that
or no,
question.
isn't it true then that you did suggest the answer of, did you use sex to quell his anger? You suggested an answer there, right?
Objection. Asked and answered.
I guess I did.
And you also asked whether or not distress to Travis means sex, right?
I believe that might have been an answer and that was an answer to that question, not a question.
Actually, that's not the way it's written. Take a look at the way it's written.
It said distress to Travis meant sex. I think that is the answer to that question.
And at the top of this page, it also says ask Jodi, right?
Right, but you,
Yes or no? It does say that at the top, right?
they weren't all questions. I do sort of stream of consciousness, so I ask Jodi questions, I get answers, I might put them on the same page. I just want to clarify that.
How is it that you are saying that you are putting some other questions on this page, other answers on this page, when they're clearly all questions here?
Objection. Mischaracterizes with her testimony.
Overruled. You may answer.
Right under, did you use sex to quell his anger? I have an answer, distress to Travis meant sex. That was an answer to that question.
So you provided your own answer to the question then. That's what you're saying,
No,
Mischaracterizes her testimony.
Overruled. You may answer.
right?
it was a question I asked Miss Arias, and so I write on the papers that I write questions on, I write answers on, I write other things on. So it's not clearly just all questions, it's not clearly just all answers. I intersperse things.
Ma'am, isn't it true that at the top of this page it says ask Jodi, correct?
Correct,
And then there are a number of writings underneath there, right?
correct.
You're not saying that as you're sitting there talking to the defendant, you're writing down ask Jodi, are you?
No, I'm not.
This is something that was done in advance, isn't it?
The question was, yes,
This document was done in advance, wasn't it?
yes.
And so when you say that, well, I write the responses, how could the responses be there if you're doing this document in advance?
I wasn't doing all that. Mr. Martinez,
Yes or no? Yes or no? Isn't it true that all of these questions were written in advance?
Judge, the original question was not a yes or no question. Or did not request a yes or no answer.
All right. Your objection is noted. Overruled. You may answer the question.
the question is correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, one of the other things that you told us is that you reviewed all of the, or a lot of the defendant's journals, right?
Yes,
And that these journals, if you will, were guided by this law that she believed in, that when you write something in there, that you should write something positive and not anything negative, correct?
That you should try to focus on the positive.
Right. And what's that law called again?
The law of attraction.
So this law of attraction, according to you, the way that, and you've had some information that you received upside and apart from what the defendant gave you, correct?
Well, I watched The Secret. That's it.
So The Secret is a movie, right?
Correct.
And in it, it talks about, or it is about the law of attraction, right?
Yes, and so there's a documentary, and I don't remember the name of that.
But you didn't watch the documentary, correct?
No, I watched the documentary as well.
Oh, you did. And then you also spoke to the defendant about the law of attraction, correct?
Correct.
And that is what encompasses your knowledge of the law of attraction, correct?
Correct.
And the law of attraction, as you've defined it for me, is that if you write something positive, positive things will happen, correct?
No, it's not that simple.
Go ahead and tell me what you believe the law of attraction is.
That's part of it, that the energy you put out in a positive way comes back to you. So you should think in a positive way, write in a positive way. And this was a documentary done by physicists, and they were talking about positive energy and all of the energy, the energy coming back to you.
And one of the things you just mentioned to us is writing in a positive way, right?
Correct.
And so, for example, this is what you applied in reading the defendant's journals, that she was influenced by this law of attraction, correct?
Correct.
And so that, according to you, she wouldn't write anything negative in that journal because it would go against the law of attraction, right?
No, I didn't say that.
Well, isn't it true that we talked about, or you talked to the defense counsel about situations as to whether or not there was anything negative about Mr. Alexander? Do you remember talking about that?
Yes, and there were several things
yes.
that were negative.
And you also were asked about certain events that occurred in their life. For example, when she alleges that he hit her. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you said, well, because of the law of attraction, it made sense to you that those wouldn't be written in the journal, right?
Yes, I believe I don't think that's the only reason, but yes.
That's part of the reason. And,
Sure.
and based on what you know about the law of attraction, you would not expect her to write anything negative in her journals because it would be contrary to that law of attraction, right?
No, I would expect that even when you have a philosophy of the law of attraction, that you're not always able to maintain it.
Okay, so in this case, though, with regard to writing negative things, you did not find anything in those journals indicating that Mr. Alexander ever laid a finger on the defendant, correct?
Objection is characterized as your testimony.
Overruled. You may answer.
Correct?
Correct.
But you still believe the defendant, though, right?
Based on other things.
And those things are her statements, right?
Those things are Mr.
Well, no. Let's look at. You believe it in part because of her statements, right?
In part.
You also believe it in part because of the law of attraction, right?
I believe that she didn't write in it because of the law of attraction, or I believe
That she
he
was-
never laid a finger on her.
You believe that the reason she didn't write these things in her journal, as you explained it on direct examination, is because, in part, she's an adherent to the law of attraction, correct?
Correct.
And that's how you went behind, if you will, the written word, correct?
Objection argumentative.
Overruled.
I believed that was a reason she didn't write in her journal.
Right, and that's why you went behind the words that indicated otherwise, right? The words never indicated that he ever hit her, correct?
Correct.